in South Carolina?
It does.
Does it stretch all the way to the point when Gannon's remains are found under that bridge?
It ends when we find Gannon.
Okay. So the first entry on this is which day and time?
So this is February 5th. It's a Wednesday, 2020.
And then you've got a line going up to cast report page 57. Why do you have that going up to that particular page at that time?
This shows where the van and the phone are at during this time.
Does this basically just show the van and the occupants, Harley, Hunt, and the defendant traveling from Orlando up to South Carolina?
It does. They stayed the full day in Orlando and then started traveling up Thursday the 6th to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They arrive and they return the van to the budget located at 1400 Cannon Road, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And the van was returned sometime before 6:10 p.m. because that's when it has every 6-hour scheduled ping.
And then for reference purposes, you have the line going above the timeline to cast report page 58. Does that corroborate the cast report page 58, returning the budget van at the budget rental place in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina?
It does. It also corroborates the residence that she was staying at for the interim at the Abernathy residence.
Okay. Will you just point that out on the map?
Sure, it's right up here.
Thank
so you have this tower with this sector that provides coverage to the Abernathy residence, and you have a van ping here.
Okay. And then moving on to the next entry on your map, or I'm sorry, on your timeline, February 8th, 2020. What is indicated on February 8th, 2020?
So the defendant gets her third phone, and we refer to this as her South Carolina phone.
And was that phone seized during the investigation?
It was on her arrest.
Did we have testimony from a detective that was involved in seizing that phone as well?
We did.
The next indicator is February 15th of 2020. You've got two entries on that. Explain what we're looking at there.
So the first one is we find the board with Gannon's blood on it at the S-curve on the state on Saturday, February 15th of 2020. Also on this day, the defendant makes a post on her Facebook account. Don't want me to get into that?
Yeah, so that particular post, was that Exhibit 50 that was admitted during Mr. Stauch's testimony early on in this trial?
It was.
What does, was that a video?
It was a video.
Of what?
Gannon, when they're in Hawaii, he's waving and says goodbye and jumps off of a dock into the water below.
People's Exhibit, I'm sorry, February 18th on this timeline, you have an indicator there. What is that?
This is the first fake polygraph that the defendant tried to obtain, where you heard the wire, the call, where they weren't going to release it because it violated their policy. And so that's when that happened.
And then February 19th entry, what is that?
That's when the note was created with the 5 altered questions that I talked about this morning from her South Carolina phone in the notes.
And that was Exhibit 692 that we admitted during your early portion of your testimony today?
It was.
Jumping to February 21st, you have 2 entries there. Explain the one on the left first.
The one on the left are some of the messages from the defendant to Nicole Mobley, who testified during this trial.
For reference purposes, was Nicole Mobley, remind everybody who Nicole Mobley was.
She was the one who kind of feigned a relationship with the defendant and told her whatever she wanted to hear in hopes to get information out of her over a Text Now app.
And those text messages that you're referring to that came from the defendant to Nicole Mobley, is that what we're looking at there?
Yes, not all of them, just a few.
And what do they say?
So the defendant sends a message to Nicole Mobley saying, "I need a witness that the guy left. I will do anything. I'm not asking you. I'm asking if you know anyone who will. I will give them my life, a reward, or whatever." And then in a second message, the defendant says, "He took a suitcase of things and made Gannon wrapped in his cover." And then the third message selected for this was, "What if you just said you remembered something suspicious after seeing this picture and explained the description and you didn't think it was relevant until now?" And those are all captured in exhibit number 233.
And exhibit 233, is that the total number of messages that went back and forth between the defendant and Nicole Mobley?
Those are all of them, yes.
Based on the context of that conversation in sum, what does it appear from your perspective to be occurring between the defendant and Nicole Mobley at this time?
The defendant is asking Ms. Mobley to lie for her to corroborate a lie to law enforcement.
And then the right side portion of February 21st, 2020, what do we have there?
That's when the second fake polygraph was done on her phone that I testified to earlier today.
Is that exhibit 692?
It is.
We then move on to March 2nd, 2020. What do we have indicated there?
That's when the defendant was taken into custody and charged with the murder of Gannon Stauch.
And then you have an indicator for an interview. Was that the interview conducted by special agent at the time, now retired, Jonathan Grusing?
That's correct.
And then the next entry on March 4th, 2020, what do we have there?
As the defendant was being transported back to Colorado Springs, she attacked one of our Paso County Sheriff's deputies. And that's the still from the GoPro just before the attack occurred.
During the portion of testimony from Dr. Torres late last week, the defendant made comments about this was Maria actually attacking the deputy. Any indication in that video that she was talking in a Spanish accent?
None.
Did she ever reference herself as Maria in that video?
No.
And then the last entry on March 17, 2020, what is that?
March 17th of 2020, we found Gannon.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach and set up the easel? We can turn the TV up. For purposes of foundation, People's Exhibit 703, what is it?
It's some of the defendant's Google searches on her Colorado phone number 1.
And what is the date span of these searches?
January 21st of 2020 through January 29th of 2020.
January 29th, for reference purposes, is that when the defendant's phone was seized by law enforcement?
It was.
Is that why that's the end of the searches on this particular exhibit?
It is.
Is it fair and accurate?
It is.
And then as it relates to 722, 720, 721, and 722, what are these exhibits?
These are Google searches from the defendant's South Carolina phone number 3. 720 spans February 19th of 2020 through February 23rd of 2020. Exhibit 721 spans February 24th, 2020 through February 26th, 2020. And then Exhibit 722 are searches conducted from February 27th, 2020 through March 1st of 2020.
These all fair and accurate representations of searches that were found on the South Carolina seized phone.
Yes, phone number 3, the South Carolina phone.
This time I'd move for admission of these exhibits 720, 721, and 722 as it relates to the South Carolina phone, and then People's Exhibit 703 as it relates to the Colorado phone.
Mr. Cook,
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 703, 720, 721, 722 will be admitted. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And permission to publish 703 at this time?
You may go.
Mr. Clark, what I'm going to have you do is start by just orienting the jury to what we're looking at, knowing that the jury will be able to take this back with them to the deliberation room at some point.
Sure.
So starting with 703, tell them about the different columns.
So on the far left, you have the date and the time that the search was made. And this is Colorado time because this is the Colorado phone. And so it's local time. And then on the right, you have the words typed for the actual search.
And then are these, I guess, can you tell the difference when you look at the download of the phone, whether searches have been deleted or whether they're still active on the phone?
Yes. So on this Colorado phone, there was just over 6,400 searches done during this time period of the phone download. She deleted about 4,500 of those. So we're left with about 2,000 searches that still have a date and a time component with the search. When you delete a search, the deleted search is still saved, but the metadata is stripped from it. So there's no date and time component. And so we don't know when the search was made. We just know that the search was made. And so just to keep it clean, we are only presenting the searches that we know when they were made.
And then as it relates to the searches that were referenced in Special Agent at the time, now retired, Jonathan Grusing, there were searches that were referenced in his interview. Were those deleted searches that he was referring to?
They were.
And so does that mean that they didn't have date and time stamps for when those searches were actually conducted?
That's correct.
Do we know, though, that those searches were conducted prior to January 29th, 2020, when the defendant's phone was seized?
They were, yes.
And then as it relates to, you said, I think, roughly 2,000 undeleted searches on her Colorado iPhone. Did all of them have any relevance to the investigations that we have on People's Exhibit 703? Do they have relevance to this investigation?
They do.
Now, starting with the first entry, what I'd like to have you do is just tell us the date and time of that first entry.
Sure. So the first one we selected, this goes in chronological order. And it's also important to note that all of these were searched at least once. So the first one was January 21st at 9:05 p.m. The defendant searched Landon Marie Hoyt.
Is that Hyatt?
I'm sorry, Hyatt. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just so the record is clear, spell the name.
Landен. Marie is Marie, and Hyatt is Hiott.
What is the next search?
Same day, but at 9:10 p.m., so 5 minutes later, U-Haul truck rental.
The next search?
9:12 p.m., U-Haul trucks rates Colorado Springs, Colorado to Orlando, Florida on January 22nd of 2020.
There was a reference in text messages that we went through on the timeline where the defendant said, I should have left last week when I was, do you remember that search?
I do.
Does that coincide with what we're seeing here? That the defendant is searching for U-Haul trucks to go to Florida?
Correct.
And is this roughly a week prior to Gannon being missing?
It is.
The next entry, what is that?
9:14 p.m., another search was made, U-Haul truck rates Colorado Springs, Colorado to Orlando, Florida on February 6th, 2020.
And so the actual date of that search, though, was at January 21st, 2020 also?
It was made a couple minutes after the previous one for the rates on January 22nd.
Are there two searches next that occurred on January 24th, 2020?
Yes.
Tell us the time of each one of those two searches.
7:32 p.m., jobs, employment in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina using Indeed.com. And then at 8:01 p.m., sometimes you just leave and take, and it's misspelled. It's spelled Notijig. I'm assuming that means take nothing.
Is that based off the context of the search term?
Yes.
Are there then now a bunch of text messages, I'm sorry, not text messages, searches on the defendant's Colorado phone that occur on January 25th of 2020?
Yes.
Tell us the first one and what time that occurred and what it is.
First one occurred at 8:48 a.m. and it's jobs, employment in Los Angeles, California using Indeed.com.
What's the next one on January 25th?
January 25th is 12:16 p.m. Now this is Saturday before Al flies to Oklahoma. So Saturday the 25th at 12:16 p.m. Find real military singles was searched.
Is there another search at 12:16 p.m. as well?
There is military dating and singles at militarycupid.com.
What's the next search on January 25th of 2020?
1:40 p.m. The search was parenting should be 4 people, not 1.
What's the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
Also 1:40 p.m. I'm over doing all the work for my stepkids and their mom doesn't help.
What's the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
It's at 1:48 p.m. and it reads, if you aren't involved in your kid's life, you are shitty.
What's the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
1:49 p.m. My husband's ex-wife does nothing for her lids.
Based on context, what do you think that the lids actually meant?
Should be kids.
Okay. Is it a typo basically on the searcher's part?
Yes.
The next search on January 25th, 2020, what time and what did it say?
1:51 p.m. I wonder if my husband's ex-wife is sending me a Valentine's card since I, raise, her, kids.
Does that coincide with what we talked about earlier with text messages from the defendant's, originating from the defendant's phone, having periods instead of spaces sometimes?
Yes, primarily happens in a lot of the searches with the periods in between.
Okay. What is the next search on January 25th of 2020 and what time?
1:54 p.m. One day, some people will, wish they treated you differently.
What is the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
7:57 p.m. Find me a rich guy who, wants me to take care of his kids.
What is the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
7:58 p.m. Find a guy who wants me to take care of, his, kids and get paid.
What is the next search on January 25th of 2020?
This is at 9:11 p.m. and it's apartments for rent in Fort Lauderdale, Florida on Trulia.com.
What is the next search on January 25th, 2020?
9:13 p.m. 1 bed, 1 bath, apartments for rent in Fort Lauderdale, also on Trulia.
What is the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
9:15 p.m. Craigslist, South Florida jobs, apartments for sale, services, community and events.
What is the next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
Still 9:15 p.m. South Florida rooms and shares on the Craigslist website.
The next one on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
9:20 p.m. South Florida jobs, in quotes, teacher on Craigslist.
The next search on January 25th, 2020 and what time?
9:47 p.m. Orlando jobs, Disney, in quotes, on Craigslist.
During the course of the investigation, did it become clear to you that the defendant had an affinity for Disney and Disney characters.
Yes.
The next search on January 24th, 2020.
9:49 p.m. Orlando jobs in quotes manager on Craigslist.
The next search on January 24th, 2020.
25th. Still 9:49 p.m. Orlando jobs cruise port in quotes also on Craigslist.
What did I say?
I think you said 24th.
Okay. And you corrected me to the 25th. Thank you. What's the next search on January 25th, 2020?
9:49 p.m. Orlando jobs airport in quotes on Craigslist.
Based on all these searches for apartments and jobs in the Florida area, to your belief, did it appear that the defendant was trying to look for a way to move from Colorado and go to Florida without the family?
Right. 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment for rent. That means you're not moving a family of 5.
And then do we have searches, 3 searches that occurred on January 27th, 2020?
We do.
Tell me the first one on January 27th, 2020.
12:09 a.m. My son, period, burned the carpet. How, period, do I fix it?
Is there a period between the fix and the it?
There is. I just couldn't see it from this angle. How do I fix, period, it?
And then the next search on January 27th, 2020, what is it and what time?
1:03 a.m. Son sick. Can he stay, period, home?
And then the next search on January 27th, 2020, what time?
2:42 a.m. Craigslist, Orlando, Florida, jobs, apartments, for sale, services, community, and events.
And for context purposes, is January 27th, later that day, the day that the defendant called 911 to report Gannon as a runaway?
Correct.
We have then several searches on January 28th, 2020. Is that correct?
There are, yes.
What is the first one on January 28th, 2020?
4:15 a.m. What is the process for, period, our runaway child?
And the next one on January 28th, 2020?
4:16 a.m. Police steps for our runaway.
The next search on January 28th, 2020?
4:16 a.m. Police steps for, period, our missing child.
The next search on January 28th, 2020?
This was the 7:17 a.m. one. Find cheap rental car deals on Priceline.
Does this coincide essentially with the defendant renting that Kia Rio at the Colorado Springs Airport on this particular day?
Correct.
The next search on January 28th, 2020?
8:17 a.m. $37 a day compact car.
And then the final search on January 28th, 2020?
12:57 p.m. Can Nintendo find my Switch?
And then now do we have 2 searches on January 29th?
Correct.
Tell us the first search on January 29th as it's relevant to this investigation.
Both were at 2:34 a.m. And the first one reads, I want immunity because it was gang related. And the second one is this Greg Hill Associates. She read an article about be careful about being granted immunity and not testifying.
And does that immunity theme come up in the recorded phone calls between the defendant and Mr. Stauch during those consensually recorded phone calls that we heard testimony from?
Numerous times.
All right. I'm going to switch out the exhibits and move on to People's Exhibit 720. Remind us first, before we get started on People's 720, the date range that we're going to be looking at for the searches here.
So this is from phone number 3, the South Carolina phone. And it's from February 19th to February 23rd, 2020. There were just over 1,300 searches during this time period on her South Carolina phone. We were able to get that down to 377 unique searches. And out of those 377, we're going to show you 96 that are relevant to this case.
All right. Do we have, it looks like 5 searches that are relevant to this investigation that occurred on February 19th of 2020?
That's correct.
Tell us the first search on February 19th, 2020 and what time? 1:22
p.m. The defendant searched crime online.
What is crime online? Do you know?
It's the Nancy Grace show for nationwide exposure crimes.
And was there reference to the defendant being in contact with the Nancy Grace show during some of these recorded phone calls that we heard?
Alleged. We don't have any proof that that the defendant spoke with Nancy Grace.
What is the next search on February 19th of 2020?
At 3:49 p.m. Palmer, period, Harold, period, Colorado, period, Springs.
Is Harold misspelled there?
It is. It's Hearld.
What is Palmer Herald, Colorado Springs?
It's the newspaper up in Palmer Lake area.
So does that indicate to you that the defendant was searching for news in the Palmer Lake area, which would cover the area where the board was found?
It was. This is during our search operations up there. The defendant was very interested in lots of local news. monitoring what our investigative tactics were at the time.
And then what is the next search on February 19th, 2020?
7:22 p.m. does text-free show location.
What is text-free?
That's the app that the defendant requested Nicole Mobley download so they could communicate with each other, and where the defendant sent those messages to Nicole Mobley.
The fact that she's searching for does text-free show location, in your mind, does that indicate an awareness of investigative efforts and efforts on her part to evade those investigative efforts?
Absolutely.
What is the next search on February 19th of 2020?
7:43 p.m. How can I make my phone's IP period address hidden?
Is address misspelled?
It is ADREES.
Again, similar to that last question, does this also indicate to you that the defendant appears to have some knowledge that she's wanting to hide information from the investigation?
That's correct.
What is the next search on February 19th, 2020?
8:11 p.m. The search was send a fake email.
And then do we have two searches on February 20th, 2020?
We do.
What is the first search on February 20th of 2020?
At 6:51 a.m. How long will fingerprints stay on an object?
What is the next search on February 20th, 2020?
8:49 p.m. I need a fake ID that's legit.
Then do we have a bunch of searches on February 21st, 2020 that are relevant for this investigation?
We do.
What is the first one on February 21st?
6:43 a.m. Children trafficking to period Mexico period from period, and it's misspelled Colorado. It's spelled COLOROSDO.
And does this roughly coincide with references by the defendant in some of these recorded consensual phone calls that were recorded by the FBI, indicating that Gannon may have been trafficked to Mexico?
Yes.
What is the next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:54 a.m. I need a criminal polygraph.
And the next one on February 21st, 2020?
A few minutes later at 7:08 a.m. I need a fake criminal polygraph.
The next one on February 21st, 2020?
7:21 a.m. Fake polygraph test.
The next one on February 21st, 2020?
7:35 a.m. Can you get away with fake lie detector? And it's misspelled DETEXTR website.
These searches for needing a criminal polygraph, fake criminal polygraph, and can you get away with a fake lie detector test? Does this indicate, in your mind, that the defendant had some awareness of trying to evade the investigation in this case?
Yes.
What is the next search on February 21st, 2020?
9:52 a.m. Gannon Stauch, El Paso, period, searching in landfill.
Was there in fact searches of landfills trying to locate Gannon's remains?
There were.
Was that publicized?
Briefly, if I recall right.
And then what is the next search on February 21st, 2020?
11:26 a.m. Search efforts for Gannon Stauch.
The next one on February 21st, 2020?
6:46 p.m. I need, and it was misspelled MEED, to change my look to hide.
And the next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:47 p.m. Face disguise.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:49 p.m. Full face and then change, but it's misspelled CHAMGE.
And the next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:51 p.m. First face transplant woman.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
Also at 6:51 p.m. Full face transplant.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:51 p.m. Face, but it's misspelled FAVE. Transplant near me.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:53 p.m. Full face plastic surgery.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
6:56 p.m. Full face plastic surgery Atlanta.
Those searches as it relates to this plastic surgery, face transplant, and that sort of thing, in your mind, did that indicate an effort to change her appearance to evade the investigation?
Yes.
What is the next search on February 21st, 2020?
7:23 p.m. Need a guy who wants me to move in.
The next search on February 21st, 2020?
7:24 p.m. Find a man with a place to let me move in.
And then do we have, let me see, 4 searches on February 22nd, 2020?
Yes.
What is the first one?
9:50 a.m. Change my facial appearance, but appearance is misspelled APPEARMCE.
And the next search on February 22nd, 2020?
Also at 9:50 a.m. Drastic ways to change your appearance.
The next search on February 22nd, 2020?
2 minutes later, see what my face will, but misspelled SILL, period, be with plastic surgery.
And the next search on February 22nd, 2020?
Also at 9:52, plastic surgery, Myrtle Beach, SC.
Did this indicate to you that the defendant is still indicating a willingness or want to change her appearance to evade the investigation?
Yes.
And then do we have 4 searches on February 23rd, 2020?
We do.
What is the first one?
3:08 a.m., Gannon Stauch found.
Was he found on February 23rd?
No.
What's the next search on February 23rd, 2020?
8:24 a.m., replacement passport.
The next search on February 23rd, 2020?
3:15 p.m., shock from period, watching someone get shot.
Is someone misspelled?
Yes, it's spelled Someoke.
Is this the first indication that we have, well, let me back up a little bit. Gannon's body still had not been found by this time, right?
Not yet.
Is this the first indication that we have of consciousness by the defendant of Gannon being shot?
Yes.
And then the final search on February 23rd, 2020.
5:13 p.m., face mask that looks real to disguise.
Is that the last search on that exhibit?
Yes.
We'll switch them out and move on to 721. What are the date ranges for People's Exhibit 721?
So again, still from the South Carolina phone number 3, February 24th, 2020 through February 26th, 2020.
We have what looks to be 7 searches on February 24th, 2020.
Yes.
What is the first one?
9:14 a.m., GoFundMe, Tisha and Harley support, but support is spelled AUPPORT.
And the next search on February 24th, 2020?
1:23 p.m., how long does it take to get DNA?
Next search on February 24th, 2020?
1:24 p.m., how long does it take to get DNA from crime?
And the next search on February 24th, 2020?
Also 1:24 p.m., how long does it take to get DNA results from a crime scene?
The next search on February 24th, 2020?
1:26 p.m., how long does it take police to get DNA results?
The next search on February 24th, 2020?
1:39 p.m., how long does it take police to get DNA results in Colorado?
And then the final search on February 24th, 2020?
1:39 p.m., how long does it take police to get DNA results in Colorado Springs?
And then are there 5 searches of relevance to this investigation that occurred on February 25th of 2020?
There are.
What is the first one?
5:49 a.m., make a security video.
And the next one on February 25th, 2020?
Also at 5:49 a.m., make a security video past tense.
As it relates to that particular search, in your mind, does it appear that somebody is trying to create what would look like an old security video to throw off the investigation?
And alter it to whatever narrative you want to fit, yes.
Okay. The next search on February 25th, 2020?
4:12 p.m., I need a new social security number to hide.
The next search on February 25th, 2020?
4:28 p.m., apply for a social if I lived on an Indian reservation.
And then the final search on February 25th, 2020?
6:56 p.m., cadaver dog.
And then the remainder of the searches on this exhibit 721, do they all occur on February 26th of 2020?
They do.
All right, let's start with the first one. What is it?
6:18 a.m., do they check in ditches under bridges?
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
6:18 a.m., maintenance under ditches under bridges.
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
6:57 a.m., can I get a plea with no jail time? The time is misspelled, just IME.
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
7 a.m., criminally negligent homicide in Colorado.
The words criminally negligent homicide, are those very specific words that people familiar with the criminal justice system would be more aware of than regular people in the community? He's a crime analyst, Judge.
Yeah, but I don't know that you would need to lay some different foundation for his knowledge of general community versus, I guess not general or legal community, I guess.
I'll withdraw the question, Judge.
Okay.
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
7:30 a.m., can I find a rich guy?
The next search on, I'm not sure what's so funny over here, Judge, but a lot of interruptions coming from my left. The next search on February 26th, 2020?
8:10 a.m., can they trace Snapchat?
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
8:30 a.m., Colorado closed cases.
Is Colorado spelled correctly?
No, it's misspelled COLROADO.
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
Also at 8:30 a.m., Colorado misspelled COLROADO, Springs misspelled SPRINGS, closed murder cases.
The next search on February 26th, 2020?
8:33 a.m., drug cartels in Colorado Springs.
Does this coincide with those consensually recorded phone calls that the FBI was involved with, wherein the defendant starts to introduce the idea that potentially a drug cartel was involved with Gannon's disappearance?
Yes.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
8:48 a.m., make my phone get a call, misspelled, just C-A-L, from Mexico.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
8:51 a.m., fake a call, period, from Mexico, period, drug, misspelled, S-R-U-G, cartel.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
Also 8:51 a.m., fake a call from Mexico, drug cartel.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
8:53 a.m., bluff my call app.
Are you familiar with what that means, Bluff My Call app?
I am.
What is that?
It's an app you can download that makes a different phone number show up on the caller ID of the recipient's phone.
Is that typically used in your experience to trick somebody into not knowing who is making a phone call?
I've seen it a couple of times in like stalking cases where they use this app or an app very similar to it to mask their number.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
8:54 a.m., what are some Mexican drug, misspelled S-R-U-G, cartel phone numbers?
The next search on February 26, 2020.
9:13 a.m., what do they do when they find a person body in another, misspelled, A-N-I-T-H-E-R, state?
The next search on February 26, 2020.
9:13 a.m., how do, period, they identify, misspelled, I-D-E-N-I-F-Y, bodies found, misspelled, F-O-U-N, in another state?
And the next search on February 26, 2020.
9:33 a.m., make a fake Snapchat video.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
10:45 a.m., can the FBI go, period, to, period, Los Canos?
What is Los Canos?
I think it's a city in Mexico.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
10:53 a.m., create a recording of someone's voice and change the words. And create is misspelled C-R-E-A-T.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
10:55 a.m., add someone's voice in a video.
Is someone's misspelled?
It is S-O-M-E-O-M-E-S.
Does this indicate to you that whoever is doing these searches is trying to change a video
Correct.
to add voices that weren't necessarily caught on the video?
Correct.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
10:56 a.m., change someone's words in a video.
The next search on February 26, 2020.
2:38 p.m., Bahamas marriage certificate.
And the final search on February 26, 2020.
2:40 p.m., I need a fake marriage license.
Is that the last search on People's Exhibit 721?
It is.
I'll switch them out and put up 722. I don't take out a light first. What are the date ranges for People 722?
The date ranges are February 27th through March 1st. And this is still off of phone number 3, the South Carolina phone.
Are there 7 searches that occurred on February 27th, 2020?
There are.
What is the first search?
7:03 a.m., how do police tell whose body has been found?
Considering the circumstances in this case where Gannon's body had not been found for a number of days, almost 2 full months, does that seem to indicate, from your perspective, some knowledge that it's going to be difficult to identify Gannon's remains?
It indicates to me that there's research being done to see how difficult it would be.
What is the next search on February 27, 2020?
7:58 a.m., can God help me escape jail time? And escape is misspelled E-S-C-A-O-E.
The next search on February 27, 2020?
8:05 a.m., how do, period, they identify whose, misspelled W-H-O-S, blood is at the scene?
The next search on February 27, 2020?
8:35 a.m., find people who want to go to, period, jail.
The next search on February 27, 2020?
8:58 a.m., Spanish girl names.
Is Maria Sanchez a Spanish girl name?
Very traditional, yes.
Is Little Lucia potentially a Spanish girl name?
Lucia is, yes.
The next search on February 27, 2020?
9:04 a.m., Petco, Nevada, Colorado Springs.
Was that a point of reference in this investigation?
3 times.
And then the final search on February 27, 2020, what is it?
10 a.m., find an immigrant who will admit to a crime.
And then are there a number, let me count them, 1, 2, 11 searches that occurred on February 28th
There are?
that are relevant to this investigation.
Yes.
What is the first one on February 28th, 2020?
7:02 a.m., how long does a body start to decompose in a bag?
Does that indicate specific knowledge about the condition in which Gannon's body was packaged and discarded?
Yes.
In what way?
He was found in a suitcase.
The next search on February 28th, 2020?
7:03 a.m., what does, misspelled W-G-A-T-F-O-E-S, what does a dead body look like after a month?
And is this basically 1 month after Gannon had went missing?
Yes.
What is the next search on February 28th, 2020?
7:04 a.m., what does a dead body look like after a month, spelled correctly this time?
And the next search on February 28th, 2020?
8:12 a.m. Active drug, misspelled DRIG, cartels in Mexico.
The next search on February 28, 2020.
8:23 a.m. Bluff my call free.
What is the next search on February 28, 2020?
8:33 a.m. Address of period drug cartels, and drug is misspelled DEUG.
And then the next search, what is it on February 28, 2020?
8:36 a.m. Current drug cartels, misspelled DEIG, in Colorado, misspelled COLORAOD, Springs, misspelled SPRINSG.
What is the next search on February 28, 2020?
7:44 p.m. How period does the FBI find people, and people's misspelled PEOOPLE?
Did the defendant find out how the FBI finds people in this case?
Oh, she found out.
What is the next search on February 28, 2020?
7:49 p.m. How period does the FBI find fugitives?
And the final search on February 28, 2020?
7:49 p.m. Well, and there's two more.
I'm sorry.
How period does the FBI find fugitives? And then how fugitives avoid capture.
Are those both at 7:49 p.m.?
Correct.
And then do we have now 3 searches that occurred on February 29th, 2020?
We do.
What is the first one?
Casey Anthony,
What time was that?
6:27 a.m.
And just for reference sake, who is Casey Anthony?
Casey Anthony was a wildly in the news case where Casey Anthony is a mom who stood trial for the murder of her young daughter, Kaylee.
And then the next search on February 29th, 2020?
6:29 a.m. Casey Anthony and Patrick McKenna.
Do you have any idea who Patrick McKenna is?
I don't.
And then this next and final search on February 29th, 2020 that is relevant to this investigation.
1:30 p.m. When does FBI take over a case?
And then the final searches on this exhibit 722, do they all occur on March 1st, 2020 as it's relevant to this case?
They do.
What is the first one on March 1st, 2020?
3:58 p.m. How to make my fingerprints not scan.
The next search on March 1st, 2020?
4:03 p.m. Fingerprint rubber.
What is that a reference to based on the way you take that?
Trying to get fake fingerprints, so your fingerprints can't be identified.
Okay. And then the final search on March 1st, 2020.
4:03 p.m. Fingerprint rubber to make fingerprint.
May I have just a moment?
Yeah.
All right, that's all the questions I have for Mr. Clark at this time.
All right, Mr. Cope.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cook.
I just have a few questions. You mentioned Dr. Torres. You were asked a question about Dr. Torres who testified. And did you see the interview? Were you in the courtroom when the Dr. Torres or Mr. Allen or Mr. Young was playing the CH or CMHIP interviews with Ms. Stauch?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Was Dr. Torres, was she one of the individuals that was asking the questions and I guess was behind the glass on the interviews you watched?
Yes.
Okay. And was that at CMHIP? Is that Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And was Ms. Stauch shackled in that video that you, as far as you could tell?
She was.
Okay. And is CMHIP, is that a facility? Is that a lockdown facility? I mean, people just don't come and go as they please. It's a lockdown facility.
I would expect it to be, but I've never been there, so
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. And talking about bath salts, way back this morning, what is your understanding of what bath salts are? Are we talking about, I'm having a tough day, I'm going to get some Epsom salt with eucalyptus in it and take a long hot bath? Is that what you mean when you're saying bath salts?
I think that's the general term. Yeah, you pour it into a bath. It's supposed to help relax or de-stress, things like that.
Okay. And were you aware of the other connotation or the other meaning behind bath salts a few years ago?
I'm aware that people were smoking it, and it was called the zombie drug.
Okay. Now, were they smoking the Epsom salt bath salts, or were they smoking a synthetic stimulant that's now been outlawed?
That's my understanding. The second one.
Okay, so when you say the zombie drug, we're not talking about people have found another use for Epsom salt and they're ingesting it some way. We're talking about a slang name for a totally different drug.
I
Is that
believe so.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I've never seen it, but that's how I understand it.
Okay. And in the Volkswagen Tiguan, was there ever any DNA of Gannon's found in that vehicle?
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you know if it was tested for DNA?
I don't recall.
And the exhibits we've just been looking at on the boards, and I was looking on my computer. Now, you just put up what you believe to be relevant to the investigation.
Yes.
Okay, so if there were hundreds or thousands of different messages or searches being done, how many? Let's see. Can I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You may.
On February 27th, I did not see these.
Oh, sure.
On February 27th, if we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, if we've got 7 searches that were done on February 27th, 2020, that were relevant to the investigation, like on the 28th, there were probably 10 or 12 or 13. So let's say an average of 10 searches a day that were relevant. How many of those do you think were irrelevant?
Sure. So from the South Carolina phone, there were just over 1,300 total searches.
Okay.
We narrowed that down to 377 unique searches. And out of that, we presented 96 searches. So whatever 96 divided by 377 is, that's your percentage.
Okay. Which is what?
I don't know.
It's too late in the day for me
Yes, sir.
to do complex arithmetic. So there was a lot of stuff that absolutely did not relate to this. The vast majority of the searches or the information you got was not related to this investigation, correct?
Sure. Out of the 377, we selected 96 to present.
Just a second, Mr. Clark. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Redirect.
No, don't need it, Judge. Thank you.
Do any of the jurors have any questions for Mr. Clark? Looks like we have one coming. Counsel approach, please. Easy for me to say. To clarify, were the messages saying she left her phone at home sent from defendant's phone or Gannon's phone?
Those came from the defendant's phone saying something effective. I left my phone at home. If you need to reach me, try to reach out on my watch. It may stay connected to Gannon's phone. And then we see them leave approximately 15 minutes later.
I will reasonable follow-up as to that question only. Prosecution. Defense? Right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our evening break. If I can have all of you in the place that you need to be so that we can start at 9 o'clock in the morning. We should be able to start on time. Again, don't discuss the case among yourselves. Don't discuss the case with anyone else. Don't do your own independent research about any aspect of this case. And with that, we will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Record proof that the jury has left the courtroom.